Good morning, everyone. I'm Bevin, and I am from the workshop group that has been working with the Environmental Defense Fund on investing in environmental and climate justice this past semester. Before I begin, I would like to thank my beautiful team and our fantastic advisor for their help and hard work this past semester. It would not have been possible without them. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of our project, some of the motivations behind it, and then I'm going to tell you about our methodology and how we went about tackling this problem. Then I'm going to tell you about our risk framework, which is one of our outputs and products this semester. Finally, I'm going to conclude with some recommendations for EDF, as well as for their investors, and some of the impact of this project. So a little bit about our client and work. We are working with the Environmental Defense Fund this past semester, and the EDF is an environmental advocacy nonprofit. We are specifically working with this sustainable finance team, and our goal is to translate environmental and climate injustices into material risks that investors can understand, care about, and act upon. So going a little bit into more about ESG, as the sustainable investing team is specifically tasked with communicating with investors on ESG issues. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, and it's a rapidly growing subsector in the investment industry that considers these factors that are commonly seen as beyond traditional financial reporting. ESG assets is a rapidly growing industry, and it's projected to surpass $33.9 trillion by 2026. For reference, the entirety of the US stock market is worth only about 40 trillion. That's why there are a lot of frameworks out there to guide ESG investment, such as the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, the TCFD. However, the EDF and we have found that environmental and climate justice related considerations in these frameworks just don't exist, or if they do, they're woefully inadequate. And that is why we are tasked with our task this semester. To illustrate that, I'm going to tell you about our case study. It is the TotalEnergies East African crude oil pipeline. TotalEnergies is a French company, and the East African crude oil pipeline is a pipeline that connects the oil fields of Hoima in Uganda to the port city of Tanga in Tanzania. TotalEnergies is a TCFD signatory, which works with the US banks. That makes them relevant for EDF's disclosure and EDF's work. However, despite the fact that they are a TCFD signatory and follow so many of these ESG frameworks, this project still went ahead, and it directly displaces 13,000 people. And also, it threatens the water source for the Lake Victoria Basin, which is the water supply for 40 million people. Women and minority groups are excluded from the decision-making process. And this is why our work is so important. Environmental and climate injustices are just not baked into a lot of the ESG frameworks. So this is what the EDF has asked of us. First, we must provide them with a slide deck, which is what they can use in their investor-facing communications as they engage with investors on environmental and climate injustices. Finally, then we have to give them a definition. And this is not a completely new definition. There are so many definitions out there, and it is really important for us to collect all the information and come up with a synthesized definition. Then we had to back up all of our research, back up all of our findings by providing them with a literature review that considers how ECJ and investing intersect. To achieve this, this is what we have decided to do this semester. First, we must survey the definition of ECJ, environmental and climate injustices. We drew salient themes from definitions by 40 different organizations and 10 industry experts. Then we conducted a thorough literature review of all the academic sources, as well as 20 interviews with various industry experts. Then we developed a risk framework based on 3 of the working groups that we have set up this semester: oil and gas, transportation, finance, and banks. Finally, we had to come up with strategies both for EDF, the Environmental Defense Fund, as well as for the investors that they're talking to address these environmental and climate injustices. So this is how we went about finding a definition for environmental and climate justice. As you can see on the green bar indicates the salient themes found in the definitions from 40 different organizations. And these are nonprofits, state and local governments, as well as the federal government, as well as some international organizations. And the blue bars show what themes came up in our interviews with industry experts. So these are experts working in the investment industry who have been thinking about ECJ. And as you can see, while there is some overlap, there are slight differences in the priority of these themes. But with that information in mind, this is the definition for environmental and climate justice that we have synthesized. Again, I want to emphasize that this is not a brand new definition. This is simply a synthesis of all the definitions that we've looked at. Environmental and climate justice is the protection of human rights through the equitable distribution of environmental and climate benefits, such as health and safety, and harms, such as pollution and climate change impacts, through engagement, inclusive decision-making, and the implementation and enforcement of policies. So now I'm going to talk about our risk framework. But first, I would like to tell you why we decided to come up with this risk framework. As an investor, all you care about is risk-adjusted returns. And as returns require you to predict the future, and most people can't do that, what you can focus on is mitigating risk. This is why we've decided to frame it this way. This is a language that investors understand. And these are the risks that we've figured an environmental and social climate injustice would lead for investors. First of all, if you could see on the top two, they are two dimensions, regulatory and reputational. These are pretty straightforward. Regulatory means risks that laws or lawsuits can pose to investors and their projects, as well as their portfolio companies. And this could be both current and future regulations. Reputational are the relationships that these investors, their portfolio companies, and their projects have with customers, employees, business partners, and other stakeholders. Permeating all of these is the transitional dimension. As the energy transition and climate change is one of the most salient challenges of our generation, there are lots of transition focused regulation coming out. There are going to be long-term considerations for investors who are going to be thinking about this going forward in the future. So these three risks are the ones that we came up with environmental and climate injustices, and I'll put these in practice. Going back to our case study, well, for reputational risks, this project spurred protests in Uganda and France, where TotalEnergies is based. Because of the reputational backlash, climate advocates has successfully pressured 24 banks and 18 insurers to not support the project. Now, as an investor, that means less co-investors and higher cost of capital, and therefore higher risk. For regulatory risks, the EU Parliament passed a resolution opposing the project. This opens them up, as France is part of the EU and TotalEnergies is based in France. This opens them up to potential lawsuits from inadequate compensation, as well as many other environmental and climate injustices that we have seen. Finally, transitional. This project is projected to emit 34 million tons of carbon dioxide annually, and its location in the global south means that the local communities will bear the brunt of the impacts of this project. And this also opens up the company to risks from reputational regulatory, as there may be more transition-friendly regulation, as well as reputational issues by people who think TotalEnergies is not doing enough to address the energy transition. So as you can see, the transition risk permeates all these. So given all these risks, what are some of the recommendations that we can give to investors? Well, first, for EDF, quantification is a big thing that we have found in our research. We recommend, among many things, to investigate the cost to businesses from fines and lawsuits due to environmental and climate injustices. A database on this would really help investors put it in perspective. Legislative action. As the EDF is an environmental advocacy organization, we recommend that they continue and begin new lobbying efforts for more state, regional, and local ECJ, ESG regulation. For the investors, we recommend that they engage in strategic engagement with their portfolio companies. Instead of just divesting from companies that are causing these environmental and climate injustices, we recommend that they demand ECJ disclosures to reduce the reputational and regulatory risk. Crisis response. For investors, it's really important to urge your portfolio companies to come up with a crisis response plan that is community focused in case any environmental and climate injustices happen. And this will make their portfolio that much stronger and that much more resilient against these risks. So what do we hope this project will do? Well, as we have seen, ECJ considerations are crucial for risk reduction and social improvements for all these projects. Our deliverables and our investor deck will hopefully allow EDF to communicate these ECJ integration strategies more thoroughly and give them the tools to implement these communication strategies with their investors. We really hope that this will lead to a real positive impact for all stakeholders, for the investors, for EDF, as well as for the communities that these investors are investing in. Thank you very much. That one here. Wait.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Bevin. That was excellent. I have a question about the chart that you were showing with the words from the different definitions of climate justice. I'm wondering, through your research, how much did you find that the definitions align between different organizations that you were analyzing?
Well, I'd like to talk more about this graph, actually. You can see there's quite a lot of overlap. There's like 76 occurrences of equity, right? That means, equity-related themes were mentioned. Obviously, these are not the specific words, but equity-related themes were mentioned 76 times in these definitions, sometimes more than once in a definition. Process is also a main thing. So that's pretty overlapping. As you can see, even for the industry experts, 8 out of the 10 industry experts have mentioned something about equity. So that's a big point of alignment there. People-centered, also a big point of alignment, processes, benefits, etc. So, there's some alignment, but there are some differences.
Hi, Bevin. Thank you for the presentation. I have another question on the definition. I'm curious as to why you all chose to combine environmental justice and climate justice, because they're different, right? Like climate justice is more on a global scale, if that's correct. What was your team's thought process behind combining this?
Well, this is actually an effort by EDF to combine both of these things, because a lot of times when you're talking, say, for example, the project that I talked about, the East African crude oil project, despite the fact that there are local issues, a lot of the bad things that this project will bring are climate related. So, it's like a combined thing that really makes it that much more important to mention to the investors in this project, for example, that are thinking about these issues. So if you just say, oh, abate the pollution and you should be good to go, right? What sort of pollution? The local water pollution, that's environmental justice. But the carbon dioxide, that's climate. So, despite the fact that they're often separate, these things for a lot of projects go hand in hand. So that's why the EDF and we decided to put them together. Time for one more. We have another question. Thank you.
Great job, Bevin. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask the kind of scale of impact that your slide deck would provide. Like what's the kind of scope of the amount of investors that EDF usually is interfacing with, and kind of how much impact will it have in terms of, how they interface within the private sector?
This is a huge, rapidly growing sphere. So EDF is talking to all the big name investors out there, and they've most famously mentioned that the investors that they're working with, they want to do well here. It's not EDF going up to them, begging them to take care of this. It's they want to, take care of these environmental and climate injustices. They just not sure how to, and that's why they're talking to the EDF. So all the big names are out there. $40 trillion, who knows? Don't quote me on that, but yeah. Thank you. Thank you.